Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the second day of our Bealtaine Living Earth Festival, where we're celebrating our living earth. Thank you all for coming, and we're delighted to see you. Yesterday, we had a visit to the Lafcadio Hearn Japanese Gardens in Tramore, and where we were guided by Keith, the head guide there, which was a wonderful visit. Today we've something different. We have Mark Rowe, who's going to talk to us about wellness in nature, and we'll come back to that shortly. Just to tell you about the festival has been running since 2005, and it does what it says on the tin. It celebrates the living earth. We are part of the living earth, and we depend on the living earth for our very livelihood, and that is, I suppose, for our very existence. And that's something that we can forget in our busy, technologically driven world, I think, very often. There's a lot of very, very good work being done by lots of different groups to highlight the importance of biodiversity and our environment. And we're delighted that a lot of those groups have come together with us over the years to promote biodiversity and our natural heritage here in the southeast of Ireland. Now, that's what we focus on. We're focusing on areas or things you can do and see around the southeast. But a lot of our outlook and our message is global. And no matter where you are, and we have people through the wonders of technology can join us from anywhere in the world. So wherever you are, it's about valuing and cherishing the biodiversity on your doorstep, and then, of course, working together to protect our planet. So these things are, I suppose, very much in the fore in modern discourse, but I think with COVID, maybe some things have slipped to the out of sight. But with COVID, we have been turning to nature for sustenance, and we have on our walks been noticing the changes of the seasons and the activities of birds and insects, and of course plant life, which is, they're the things we see most easily. So throughout the festival, we're going to be looking at different aspects of this. Now, I was sent in some pictures, and this one is, I think, from this is somebody taking a photograph of an area managed for wildlife, and you see lots of these areas around the country. And it's also really good because it's a public information exercise. People see these and they really think. And we also, so keep your pictures coming in. Send us them on Twitter or by email or Facebook, whatever is your fancy. And here is, I suppose, this is a fast food roadside diner for bees and other pollinators, and another nice picture. We're just going to, yesterday I showed a video of things that happened in the festival before, and now I'm going to show you just some photographs from the festival. These are our partners this year, but we've had loads and loads of partners over the years. And young people, of course, are really important to us. And if you're tuning in every evening for our adult events, you might like to know that we expect to have 3,000 young people doing our events during the week. And unfortunately, it's all remote, and they won't get up close and personal with animals and plants like you see in these pictures, maybe a little too close for some people's liking. But these events are going on. We do have Dave's Jungle. We do have a lot of these events are going to be going on remotely. The Copper Coast and other events. And we'll also have Eric the Birdman tomorrow, and we see him there in full flight. So that's what it looks like normally when we're out and about, and hopefully this will be the last time we're fully online. I suppose I need to mention a few important dates that are coming up in the week. We have Fascination of Plants Day, and that's the 18th of May. And we'll follow that by World Bee Day on, oh, I have the wrong date there. So that's the May the 20th is World Bee Day, and we'll be celebrating that as well. And then the big day really is next Saturday, which is the Biodiversity Day, formerly called the International Day for Biological Diversity. That was a bit of a mouthful. It was set up by the UN to have a focus on biodiversity. And I think that it's going for over 10 years. We've been involved with the festival as part of it every year. And we're delighted that since we started, the whole idea of biodiversity is much better understood by the public. Before that, we looked at maybe individual species and our individual areas, gardens, our parks, and now we see things in its totality, and we realize that we all depend on each other. And one of the driving forces is now an economic imperative, and that we really realize that it will actually cost us money not to do anything. There would be major, major issues. And this was a bit of a stumbling block in the past. Maybe people thought looking after the environment was incompatible with economic growth. And in a sense it is, but we have to realize, and we put the brakes on now and say we have to find another way of doing things. So pollination is very much an example of where it's really important economically, but we also have, maybe a lot of people come from the point of view of, well, we're custodians of nature, and other people would have a point of view, no, we're part of nature and no more important than any other part, and we shouldn't allow damage to any other part. And then I suppose there's another approach, and that is to value nature, and that is to see how important it is for our own wellness. And that, and I suppose that's something that the restrictions in the pandemic have certainly brought through to us, the importance of nature and being in nature. And when we can't travel to places we like to, we feel that loss. And so tonight we're delighted to have Dr. Mark Rowe with us. He's a family physician, practicing over 20 years in Waterford, and he is the founder of the Waterford Health Park. And that's a beautiful building designed by Pugin, the architect famous for the House of Parliament in Westminster and many others. Now, Dr. Rowe has, in addition to having a large practice, is also a major proponent of lifestyle medicine. And this is, I suppose, we need very much to be working towards preventative medicine, towards keeping people well rather than waiting till they get sick and making them better. And Dr. Rowe is one of the strongest proponents and the most enthusiastic and convincing proponents of this approach. He's the author of 2 books, A Prescription for Happiness, The 10 Commitments to a Happier, Healthier Life, and the Men's Health Book. And he's well known for his talks and his writings in the media. And we would recommend you look out for his TEDx talk, The Doctor of the Future, Prescribing Lifestyle as Medicine. Mark has been very generous with his time with us here in Calmast, and has given talks for us in events like Science Week and that. And we're really delighted. He is very busy, and we're really very, very grateful for him making time for us always. So I'll pass you over to Mark now, and let's learn all about wellness in nature.
Well, Owen, thank you very much for that very, very kind and generous introduction. Not necessary, but greatly appreciated. And, you know, I want to give a great, I suppose, congratulations to all the work that you are doing in WIT, you and your colleagues, in terms of CalMast and in terms of biodiversity and promoting a more sustainable future for each and every one of us. Because I think that is really, really important. And as you said in the introduction, I've been a family physician now for over 25 years. But I do really believe in this idea of lifestyle as medicine. And I'm not saying we have to get rid of conventional medicine, far from it. Science and conventional medicine can be absolutely fantastic, life-saving actually at times. But we do need to use all the additional approaches that we can to not only prevent complications of chronic disease, but prevent those conditions arising in the first place. So really it's about, I suppose, less pills and more skills, as I say, to put it very, very simply, focusing on what's strong as opposed to what's wrong. And I think in that context, you know, I can't think of anything really that is probably better for your overall vitality in terms of not just your physical well-being, but your mental, emotional, spiritual, relational well-being, connection with your environment, not just the outer environment you spend your time in, but the inner environment of thought and experience. All of these things are benefited by really an immersion and spending time and developing more of an appreciation for nature. And I suppose more than anything else, over all my time as a doctor, what I've really come to appreciate is just how interconnected all the various elements of your well-being really are. And the World Health Organization put it so well when they said that health is more than the absence of disease. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and relational well-being. And I've really come to understand that these elements I've mentioned really do interconnect in such an important way. So having said that, you know, imagine, you know, a prescription you could get that you could refill and repeat indefinitely with no side effects, that is free, and something that's going to recharge you from stress, something that's going to restore that sense of emotional equilibrium, something that's going to enrich your emotional bank account with positivity, something that's going to enable you to think more clearly, think more creatively, think more innovatively, lower your blood pressure, slow your heart rate, lower your stress hormones, and make you feel more connected to the world around you. And that's just how good spending time in nature really is. I mean, I really think it is a wonderful prescription. I call it the vital sign that time makes visible. So, you know, we have conventional vital signs in medicine. You get your blood pressure checked, you get your pulse checked, your breathing rate, your temperature, all these kind of things are vital signs. But I really think that you could consider your time spent in nature each week as a new vital sign. In other words, a new additional measure of your overall well-being. And, you know, intuitively, this is something I've felt and really experienced for a long, long time, because I'm very lucky to live close to the beautiful Mount Congreve Gardens. And I've always found that spending time in nature has really enabled me to recharge from the busyness of a stressful day at work, working as a doctor. I've always found I felt better after time spent in nature, even on the beautiful Waterford Greenway. And in many ways, the Mount Congreve Gardens have become my own personal creative laboratory. My Menlo Park, as Edison would say, you know, it's a space for me which enables me to think more clearly, come up with new ideas, and really clear out the brain fog of a stressful day at work. And, that's why I began to prescribe walks in nature about 4 years ago for patients in collaboration with Mount Congreve, because I'm really convinced that spending time in nature is really so good for you. But it's not just based on my own hunches. It's not just based on my own intuition or based on my own sense of that nature is good for you, even though our own direct experience of the world we spend time in, our own subjective account of reality, is really important and should never be discounted. But you've got to marry that with what the objective evidence tells us. In other words, what does the science tell us? Because fundamentally, I'm a scientist. And, I went to medical school. I love science. And, medicine is a science. It's also an art form, but it's a science really fundamentally. So I'm really interested in those things where science supports their use. And there's such a tremendous body of science growing all the time around the world of how good for us nature really is. And this is a term called biophilia, because it turns out our desire to spend time in nature is hardwired. So, biophobia is a fear of spiders or a fear of snakes. It's kind of hardwired as well. So biophilia is this hardwired desire to connect with nature. And, it turns out there's really interesting research from all over the world as to just how good this connection with nature is. So in Japan, for example, they've shown that as little as 15 minutes walking in the woods can lower your cortisol level, which is your stress hormone, can help reduce blood pressure, slow down heart rate, reduce feelings of fatigue and anxiety, and boost vigor and vitality. In New Zealand, they've shown that every additional 1% of green space within 3 kilometers of where you live reduces mental health conditions by 4%. Other research across a whole range of countries, from Denmark and Scotland, Canada, the United States, has shown that living close to nature reduces your risk of more than 15 chronic health conditions, from depression and anxiety to asthma, heart disease, and diabetes. In Finland, a Scandinavian country where they have very, very high prevalence of winter blues and depression, they've come up with what's called a minimal effective dose. So what's the dosage of time you need to spend in nature to reap the benefits? And it turns out that the minimal effective dose is about 5 hours a month. So getting out in nature for about 5 hours per month, not all the 5 hours together, it's sequential, you build it up. It could be 10 minutes a day, or it could be maybe an hour and a quarter a week. That's enough to reap these health boosting benefits. And perhaps most interestingly of all, research from Toronto in Canada has found that neighborhoods that have an additional 11 trees per block, in terms of a block of houses, those people lucky enough to live with those extra 11 trees on their block or on their avenue, they have lowered rates of diabetes and lowered rates of heart disease, equivalent to being 1.4 years younger, or earning an extra 20,000 Canadian dollars a year. In other words, living closer to nature, living closer to trees is good for your well-being, and it reduces your risk of a whole range of chronic health conditions. Perhaps the pioneer in this area was a very famous environmental psychologist called Roger Ulrich. He was a really interesting American who had a lot of kidney problems when he was a young boy and spent a lot of time in hospital. And he was in a room that had a view of a wonderful tree out the window. And I think that sparked his interest later in environment and the potential health benefits and psychology and so on. But he did some fascinating research in American hospitals, and he found that surgical patients who had a room with a view of nature had a shorter post-operative stay, needed less pain relief post-op, and suffered less post-operative complications compared to people in hospital beds who didn't have the luxury of a view of nature. So it's really interesting that the view of nature can have such a fundamental impact on our health and well-being. And it turns out that nature, if you think about the brain on nature, nature does a lot of interesting things to that space between our two ears. So firstly, it helps to reset your biological clock. So your biological clock is your circadian rhythm. It's the natural 24-hour rhythm of day and night that we're naturally attuned to. And, you know, thousands of years ago, we would have got up at dawn, foraged throughout the day and gone to bed probably shortly after dusk. And of course, nowadays, many people are suffering from what I call indooritis. They're spending so much time indoors. In fact, research has shown that in the Western world, most people are spending more than 90% of each day indoors. And, you know, I can tell you as a doctor that I have noticed differences between people who live the outdoor life and people who spend their entire days working at desks in offices. It's just a subtle observation, but I do notice a difference in that the people who are outdoors often appear to be less stressed, more connected, more balanced, more grounded. It's just an observation. But what the science tells us is that if you spend your day in an office, you're going to be exposed to about 250 to 500 lux. Lux is the intensity of light. Whereas if you're outdoors on a beautiful sunny day, you may be getting 100,000 lux. Even on a cloudy day, it's probably 10 to 20,000 lux. And research suggests we need at least 10,000 lux of light exposure for 30 minutes a day. Now, blue light is shortest in the morning. So blue light exposure in the earlier part of the day before noon is better to reset our biological clock. So getting out in nature, I think the first thing is to think about your light exposure. Secondly, when you're in nature, you give yourself what I call a brain break. In other words, the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that sits in front of the cortex. It's the very front part of your brain. It's the youngest part of your brain. And that's the seat of executive function and rational decision making and figuring things out. And that part of your brain tends to get very overloaded and very busy, being busy, thinking about all the complex goings on in the world and in your life. In nature, it's like you plug it out for a while. You disconnect from the busyness of the world to reconnect with the essence of who you are. When that happens, the beta waves, these are waves that your brain produces when you're busy and stressed, turn towards alpha, which reflects a more chilled out, relaxed, calm state, the opposite of stress in essence. In South Korea, they looked at this and they compared using fMRI scans. That's their living, breathing scans. They showed people pictures of stressful scenes in urban environments, traffic jams, etc. And they compared the scans with people who were looking at pictures of the woods and greenery. And they found that when you're looking at the urban environment, the amygdala, which is the almond-shaped and sized red button, it's the stress center in your brain, kind of went on to red alert, whereas it calmed down when you were looking at the images of nature. Research in Stanford University has found that a 90-minute walk in nature compared with a 90-minute walk in an urban environment found that the walk in nature significantly reduced what are called depressive ruminations, that tendency to beat yourself up with your inner critic and merry-go-mind of anxious negative thoughts, and enables you to be nicer to yourself. And that has been shown on fMRI scans in terms of areas known as the anterior cingulate gyrus and the insula. These are areas of the brain that deal with empathy and altruism. Furthermore, when you're in nature, you boost your hippocampus, the area of the brain that deals with memory. You become more altruistic, in other words, more compassionate and caring for other people. You become more creative In Stanford, they found, simply a 20-minute walk can double the amount of creative ideas and solutions you have to a problem, compared with just sitting around a table at your desk. You become more empathic. And in terms of your emotional bank account, that's a term I use for your emotional well-being. Spending time in nature reduces stress hormones. So you dampen down cortisol and adrenaline. You quieten your inner critic, which is that, some people call it the monkey mind. I call it the merry-go-mind of anxious, negative thoughts and that negative self-talk. You quieten that down. You bring on positivity neurochemicals, including serotonin, which makes you feel more confident and more positive, oxytocin, which makes you feel more connected, dopamine, more motivated, noradrenaline, less anxious. You bring on all these positivity neurochemicals. It enables you to more easily enter into a flow state. A flow state is sort of peak experience, peak performance, where you're simply at one with your surroundings. And, it enables you to really, I suppose, really connect more clearly with a sense of mindful presence and with the essence of who you are. So that's really what the brain does on nature. And what I want to talk about now for a few minutes is this really exciting idea called forest therapy. And just before we went on air, Owen and I and Sheila, and Ben, we were just talking about, forest therapy. And this was something I was able to do at the Mount Congaree Festival about almost 2 years ago now, the summer before last, before COVID, as it were. And what's really interesting about forest therapy is this all comes from Japan, where this brilliant Japanese doctor called King Lee took Japanese businessmen who are typically stressed out, overworked, perhaps heading for karoshi. Karoshi is this Japanese term for death from overwork. I don't know if you've ever seen the videos of Tokyo, but they literally have guys there to shove you into the subways at 7 o'clock in the morning. They're all rushing and racing. And he took these businessmen up into the woods for a couple of hours. They felt better. He said, interesting. So he did it repeatedly. And before and after each walk in nature, he would check their hormones, stress hormones, their blood pressure, their pulse rate, and how they felt. And he discovered that, spending time in the woods lowered stress hormones like cortisol, lowered blood pressure, reduced heart rate, and improved subjective well-being. And this was the origin of forest therapy. It's taken off in Asia big time. There's more than 40 designated trails in Japan. There's plans to have over 100. There's a lot of these trails in South Korea and Scandinavia and other places as well. And I suppose it's a really interesting idea that just as, 8 hours sleep is really good for your health as an investment, getting out and spending time in the woods in nature is possibly an equally good investment for your health, for your well-being, and for your vitality. So what's really interesting is to actually ask the question, why? Why would spending time in the woods or spending time in nature be so good for you? And there are a number of different factors involved. Firstly, trees all talk to one another. And I'm not crazy in saying this. There is a web of interconnection between trees in the woods known as the Wood Wide Web. And the way trees communicate with each other is really, really interesting. They do it through chemicals known as phytoncides. And phytoncides are natural antibacterial, antifungus, antiviral agents that help to strengthen the immune system of trees, allow trees to communicate with each other. And it turns out that inhaling these phytoncides is very good for our health and well-being. In fact, when you're inhaling these phytoncides, and in Japan, certainly the hinoki oil from the Japanese cypress tree seems to be one of the main phytoncides, but I think all plants pretty much produce them. And often you can't smell them. You can't smell them, you can't taste them, you can't see them, but they are there, and incredibly good for your well-being. There's research to suggest they increase significantly what's known as the natural killer cells. These are immune boosting cells in your immune system, and even 2 hours in the woods can keep your natural killer cell levels up for 30 days afterwards. And these natural killer cells have been shown to be involved in allowing you to naturally fight inflammation in the body, fight cellular damage in the body, and help to strengthen your immune system, keeping you biologically younger and helping to protect you against many chronic health conditions, from diabetes to heart disease. It may even have a role in reducing your risk of some cancers. So that's really, really, really interesting stuff. As well as the phytoncides, negative ions in nature play an as yet really unknown role in well-being. I mean, we know there are negative ions in the water. We know there are negative ions in the woods, on the ground. And from a scientific point of view, we don't know yet how they benefit your health. But certainly there seems to be some evidence that, taking off your shoes in nature and grounding yourself, even in your front garden, standing barefoot in the grass, seems to have some benefits in terms of making you feel more connected to the world around you, reducing feelings of toxic stress, and boosting your sense of mindful presence. There are also different bacteria in the soil in nature. One well-known one is called Mycobacterium vaccae, and Mycobacterium vaccae, it's a spore in the soil, and you can inhale it walking in nature, and that seems to boost your subjective feelings of happiness and enhance your overall well-being, and perhaps boost what's known as what's called soft fascination. William James, he was a famous psychology professor in Harvard over 100 years ago, talked about this thing called soft fascination. And of course, one of the great things about spending time in the woods is what I call a forest therapy immersion. So this is a multi-sensorial immersion in nature. And this is something I did in Mount Congreve pre-lockdown. I'm hoping to get to do it again, hopefully, if not later this year, then certainly next year in a post-COVID world. And that's really when you immerse yourself in nature using the 5 senses of sight and sound and smell and touch and even taste, where you really take a few minutes to stop and really pay attention to the environment around you. Listen to the leaves rustling through the trees, the wind, birds singing, maybe twigs crunching under your feet, maybe touching a tree, maybe tasting some wild berries or something like that. I mean, it's really, you can do this yourself, but it's a great mindful exercise to become more present. And as I say to people every day at work, giving yourself the gift of being more present is really probably the greatest gift you can give yourself, because in the moment we're sharing right now, this present moment, there is no past to be concerned about. There's no future to be anxious about. There is only the now, the present moment. And when you build that sense of mindful presence, you expand the present moment. And that can be a great sense of security and serenity and really inner peace and contentment. And I really believe that one of the greatest gifts any of us can acquire is the gift of peace and the gift of contentment, because I think all good things flow from that. So having that 5 sense, multisensorial immersion in nature through forest therapy is really a great gift to yourself, and obviously by extension to everybody around you, because you don't live in a jam jar. Emotion doesn't exist in isolation. We're human beings. Emotion is contagious. So everybody around you in your own space, your loved ones, your friends, your family, your work colleagues, everybody's going to benefit from your commitment to really what I say is enhancing your own self-care, investing in your self-care, investing in your well-being, simply by committing to spend more time in nature and become more mindful of the environment you find yourself in. So just in summary, I'm just going to really summarize what I've said just for a couple of minutes. I really believe spending time in nature, it's like a new vital sign for your well-being. I think it can be as good for you as restorative sleep, or a vigorous exercise program, or a plant-based or plant-focused diet, or any of the other well-recognized modalities of sort of health and well-being. I think time in nature should really now be considered one of those. Finland has said about 5 hours a month is the minimal effective dose. But I think it's all about starting. It's all about progress, and those small daily improvements over time really can make a big difference to your well-being. Those small daily investments can make a huge difference. You don't need to have 2 hours to go out in the woods. Simply going outside for 5 minutes in the morning, listening to the birds singing, going for a walk at lunchtime, moving more. I mean, these are all simple ways we can bring more nature into our lives. Maybe consider having a plant in your office or a plant in your home, something else to care for and think about. And of course, plants bring so much more oxygen-rich air into your environment as well. And when you do commit to spend more time in nature, it will boost your physical health in terms of having a beneficial impact on your blood pressure, on your pulse rate, particularly on your stress hormone levels, on your mood in terms of reducing feelings of toxic stress, anxiety, depression, depressive ruminations, boosting your emotional bank account with positivity, increasing natural killer cells, which may have potent anti-inflammatory and disease protecting benefits for you in a longer term, making you feel more confident, connected, and part of the world around you. And, I think every tree counts. Clearly, there is natural wastage. Old trees die, need to be replaced. But we should always plant where we have, where trees have died. We need to focus on planting more trees, thinking about the next generation, not thinking 5 or 10 years down the line, but maybe thinking 100 years down the line. A wise man once said, one of the signs of wisdom was somebody who had the courage to plant trees that he or she would never live to sit under. So you need to think 100 years ahead. I think that's the essence of planting trees. As I said, the research from Toronto has shown they are incredibly good for our well-being. We need to think about how we green our neighborhoods. If you're thinking seriously about mental health for our young people, mental health for everybody, I think nature should become an important part of that conversation and can enable us to become more active participants in our own well-being. So I want to wrap it up with that. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. Again, I want to say a big well done to everybody in CalMast and WIT for all of their leadership in terms of promoting nature, biodiversity. As somebody that's from Waterford myself, I'm privileged and proud to support this. If you're listening, please go and visit the fabulous green attractions in our neighborhood, whether it's the Mount Congreve Gardens, the Lefidio Hearn Gardens in Tramore, the Cummer Mountains, the Waterford Greenway. We have so much on our doorstep, and we have exciting plans to make Waterford a really green city in the future. So thank you all very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, and we certainly would echo that. It's a major message from this festival to to introduce people to what's available in our region. If you're from the region, you probably familiar with these places, and you would probably start as the summer moves on. You'll get out and about and visit them. If you're not from the region, you're probably already making a mental note to visit. We have so many wonderful places right across the southeast, and from the Castlecomer Discovery Park up in Kilkenny down to the Wexford Slobs and across to places like Curramore, Lord Waterford's estate, the Mount Congreve, of course. I'll just show you there. This is where that Mark was talking to us about, a wonderful place to go. So we're delighted to be able to bring these wonderful visitor attractions to you. But we're talking today about the benefits we can have in our health from visiting these areas. So maybe if there's questions, if you like to put them in the chat, or if you like, you can unmute yourself and ask questions directly. So that's the last year we hadn't got that feature, so this year we have. So there's a number of people. Maura says thank you, very interesting, and a motivation to be more active and outdoors. And Mary says thoroughly enjoyed the talk. Thank you sincerely. And then there's a question there. Is there from Sheila is asking, are different places in nature better for well-being than others? Is there a scale? So maybe are all places equally, or does it have to be an exotic forest or some place of outstanding beauty?
I don't think so at all. I think, in fact, research has shown that, and this was something I didn't actually mention in my talk, was about this idea of fractal patterns. And what's really interesting, Owen, is that the fractal patterns are these, asymmetrical, repetitive patterns in nature. So looking at a tree, looking at the branches in the tree, looking at the clouds, looking at all the different patterns on flowers and so on. And even just simply looking at flowers in a pot tunes you into the fractal patterns. And these fractal patterns are hardwired to be recognized on the retina. That's like the screen at the back of your eye that kind of allows you to see what you're seeing. And fractal patterns, recognizing fractal patterns were hardwired for. It seems to reduce stress levels significantly. Research from Oregon University in the US suggests by as much as 60%. It builds that sense of inner serenity and self-reflection. So simply seeing fractal patterns is good for you. In fact, they've also shown that even for somebody in the tech world who is working at an office all day on Monday and can't get outdoors, if your screensaver is a picture of nature, that in itself has beneficial impacts on your cortisol level. So simply recognizing those pictures of nature, it's one of the reasons why, as human beings, we're attracted to good views. We like the view, whether it's a view of the woods or greenery or a view of the ocean or blue or both. And particularly from a height, there's some research. Darrell Kettner, he's in the Greater Good Science Center, Western United States, talks about awe walks, that when you go into nature and you have an experience of awe, whether it's, looking at a really tall tree, or it might be a beautiful view that takes your breath away, or it could be something as simple as seeing a bumblebee, flying. I can never get my head around how bees can fly, but it is quite awe-inspiring to see them do their thing in the flowers in the garden. So I think, whatever you can do is good enough. It's not about being, of course, it'd be lovely to think we could all just zoom ourselves over to the Grand Canyon or whatever, but the real world and real life isn't like that. So it's being good enough, doing what you can, and just trying to get some exposure to nature every day. I think that's what it's all about.
Owen.
Yeah. So yes, come in there. Yeah.
Thanks, Owen. My name is Peter from Carlow, and I have failed each time to get my chat in. Whatever I'm doing, it's doing it wrong. But I can very briefly say to Dr. Rowe, thank you very, very much for your book, which 2 years ago was a huge help to me. And the second thing I would like to say is that when I first heard of Japanese forest bathing, I said, that's absolutely bull. It's only a walk in the forest. For God's sake, what are they doing? And then last year, in the middle of the pandemic, I was lucky enough to be able to walk in the woods every day. And to my surprise, I realized I was lifted by the walk in the woods. And I said, Lord, those Japanese have something. So it is a cynic there is now a convert. But I so appreciate everything he said. And thank you for the talk.
Well, thank you so much, Peter, for your kind words, which I greatly appreciate, and for sharing your own observed experience of the benefits for you of spending time in nature. And, you know, I think it was Einstein who said, look deeply into nature and you will understand everything more clearly. And, you know, I think one of the beautiful things about nature is it's always changing and it's always constant. It's sort of a bit of a paradox. It's the constancy of change. And it just is. The tree grows, the plant grows, it does its thing, it's present. And I think it can teach us so much. In a world of madness, in a world of distraction, in a world of busyness, where there is so much potential toxic stress from so many areas, whether it's noise or emails or whatever it might be, it's endless in the modern world. Nature is the perfect antidote to the busyness of life, to allow yourself the gift, as I said, of mindful presence, and to be yourself and just be present and just enjoy it for what it is, because nature won't ever pretend to be anything other than what it is at that moment. So thank you, Peter.
Okay, have we any more? Mike says, thank you so much. The woods have been my salvation for the last 30 years. So that's thank you, Mike. Stephen has a long comment here. Do you want to come on and or will I read it out, Stephen? No, he's not rising to that. So he said, thank you, Dr. Rowe. I believe you explained important actions for us to take, and hopefully I will incorporate your advice. Quick question, should the medical system move to the old Chinese method of paying a doctor when you're healthy, tongue in cheek, and encourage wellness education rather than the present treatment ailment focus?
I think that would be a great step forward. I think, unfortunately, there is so much chronic illness right now. That's probably a way off, but I think it's a lovely thought and it's a great thing to aim towards. This idea of people being well, and my very simple idea on this is it's really about education. I think, you know, education lifts all boats, as they say. And if you know more, you can do more. And if you know more, you can make better choices. I call it health IQ, having the knowledge, having the awareness, and the right attitude to make better choices and decisions when it comes to your long-term health and well-being. And as I say, to become an active participant in your well-being as opposed to simply a passive consumer of healthcare. And the great thing about this topic called well-being, and specifically today with regard to spending time in nature, as Peter expressed so well, spending time, you know, in the woods. And these things aren't expensive. These things cost very little. In many cases, they cost really next to nothing. And that's sometimes people can kind of lose sight of that. But these things, these simple, timeless truths about how we function best really are the greatest gifts of all, and generally they're next to free.
Yeah, well, they're certainly they're free, and you know, it's I think something like you know, it's the same messages about exercise itself, but I think we've learned now we sleep, diet, and exercise uh, were the kind of the three pillars of health, and then now we have exercise outdoors, be nature as well added onto that. So that's a prescription for a happy life or a happier life. Um, just you mentioned education there. Do you think that, I mean, I have great memories of primary school at this time of the year, and you're looking out at the sunshine and everything outside, and a teacher would say, "It's such a beautiful day. I think we'll have the class outdoors." And they were days that really stuck in your mind. And should this be part of education? These were little treats coming near the end of the year. Um, but should we be designing our schools? Now, some schools are very lucky; they have lovely grounds and that. But should this be part of every school design?
I think so. Oh, and I think if you know, I think one of the best ways, I mean, they've shown this in Scandinavia, if you want to really bed down sustainable long-term change, start with the small children, because one day they'll be big adults. And I think that's a great opportunity to really embed the really fantastic ideas about nature and nourishing and nurturing your environment from a very, very young age. One of the things I do as a GP, I'm very fortunate. I get to teach young GPs, family doctors in training. So we have regular sort of tutorials, and I like to walk and talk where possible. I call it talking because at least you're moving. So we're walking around the convent there on Thursday at lunchtime. You know, it's about 20 minutes around the block, as it were, half an hour. And but the grass had been just cut there, and just opposite Manor Lawn Estate, and it was a lovely smell of freshly cut grass, and it just reminded me of my own primary school days, those carefree days, the freshly cut grass, and just that smell can just remind you of happy times.
Could I ask you just another question on that? You were talking about how you know, being in nature, even the person with the window view of nature in the hospital. Is there any work in prisons in looking at? I mean, we know the Victorian prison was to starve people of a view of everything except the redeeming light from the sky. But is there work in prisons at all, or is there potential there?
I think so. Definitely in terms of rehabilitation, it's not something I would know a lot about. I have a friend who is an environmental psychologist in Holland, and she works with the prison system extensively in Holland in terms of putting bright paint on the walls and greening the sort of grey environments there. But I don't know enough about the Irish system. But look, I think, Owen, I think anywhere where there's a grey concrete jungle, or where there's greyness, where there's urban, we need to figure out new ways that we can reimagine those places and those spaces to make them greener, because everybody
Yes.
benefits from that. And particularly, I thought the New Zealand research, for me, it's a game changer. The idea that every 1% of extra green space within 3 kilometers of somebody's home reduces mental health conditions like anxiety and depression by 4%. I mean, that is huge if that was really applied. And if you think about, and the research in other countries has shown that it's the more deprived people who potentially benefit most, because of course people that are less privileged in life often live in the more urban deprived areas, and they're the people that will benefit maybe most from greening of these environments. So you know, you talk about perpetuation of deprivation, but I mean, I think, you know, prescribing nature and greening the environments is a great way to kind of counterbalance that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think we should consider every tree important, and that it should be very seriously considered before we cut them down. And you know, we're still very poor compared to our European cousins in our cities with the amount of trees. I see Deirdre Cahill mentions that forest schools have been getting a foothold in preschool in England, and she's heard of a few here. So that's great news. Steiner School are tiny in numbers, but they have nature. They also have nature as the primary teacher, which is interesting. Thank you, Deirdre. And Barbara Rafferty shares with us that the prison in Portlaoise has a beautiful gardens and the prisoners work in it. So I'm sure I'm sure there's some very, very progressive people in the prisons, and I'm sure they're on this already. They don't need me to be suggesting it. Mark, one of the things I would like to say, I suppose, that just in thanking you, Mark, is you mentioned the word awe, and I think that scientists sometimes have been remiss in using science to explain away things, and really that's a terrible thing to be doing, to dismiss things with an explanation, whereas the true scientist is in awe of nature, and the more the scientist knows, the more they realize how amazing nature is and how little we know about it. So I think it's really important for anyone involved in science communication to be emphasizing and nurturing that sense of awe that science, and this is an argument going back to the Romantic period, but you know, scientists need to spread that the wonder of nature more. That should be important. Thank you very much, Mark. That was really interesting and fascinating, and I think it's going to be of great help to a lot of people. This video will be edited and posted on our website, so it'll be available to lots more people. And your work, as we've heard here today, has great impact with people all over the world. So that is great, Mark, and we're delighted to be able to bring this to the attention of everybody. I'm going to ask Sheila Donegan now to join me and tell us a little bit about what's coming up in the festival tomorrow and for the rest of the week.
Thanks, Owen. And Mark, thanks so much for a wonderful talk. I think during COVID, we've all developed a greater appreciation of nature, and I'm hoping that's something that, you know, we will all continue going forward. Just to give you an idea of what's coming up during the week, tomorrow we have well-known broadcaster and author Eric Dempsey. He's making a welcome return to the festival. Normally, Eric would be guiding us on dusk walks in places like Mancongreve and Curramore Estate. Unfortunately, as Ona said, we can't do that this year, but you know, Eric will be coming right into your home, streaming through livingearth.ie at 5:30 tomorrow evening, telling us how to identify the birds that will come into our gardens and what we can do to protect their environment. So really looking forward to that. Then on Tuesday, we have the guides of JFK Arboretum. They're going to introduce the viewers to the park, exploring the stunning blooms of the rhododendrons that they have. Do you know there's 500 types of rhododendrons in the JFK Arboretum, and there's 120,000 trees. Unfortunately, we're not going to get to see them all, but this will give us a great insight into the work of the guides and the gardeners in the park, and tell us about the biodiversity and the wonderful trees that they have there. On Wednesday, we have from the Copper Coast, we've Robbie Galvin and Kieran Craven of the Copper Coast Geopark. They'll introduce us to the coast and beaches along the stunningly beautiful Copper Coast, featuring beaches like Pharisee, Anstown, and again, telling us about the environment and the effect of climate change on these beautiful, stunning locations and on the biodiversity that's present there. We're really lucky on Thursday, which is World Bee Day. We have Dr. Una Fitzpatrick, who's the author of the National Pollinator Plan, is going to be talking us through the pollinator plan, how it developed and what we can do to protect the important pollinators, the bees that we all need so much. On Friday, we have a glorious talk by Brian White, who's going to lead us along the Blue Way in Carrick-on-Suir, explaining to us about the natural heritage and the history of Carrick-on-Suir, and show us the wonderful sights that we can see along the Blue Way. And on Saturday, as you mentioned, it's the International Day for Biological Diversity. We have WIT horticulture lecturer Yvonne Grace. She's going to talk to us about wildflower meadows and no mow May, which I have to say I'm a great fan of, and so really looking forward to seeing all that. Again, everything is live on livingearth.ie at 5:30 each day. Just in running in tandem with Living Earth TV, we have a schools program, and we've had such a fantastic response from schools all around Ireland. That's the wonder of technology. With schools all over Ireland learning about the Southeast and what we have on offer here. We have lots of workshops and talks where children learn about the life and plants available on the coast along the whole Southeast. We also have on Monday and on Wednesday, we have Dave's Jungle and the National Reptile Zoo, who are going to introduce primary school pupils to lots of exotic plants and animals. And, you know, I'm actually glad that's taking place virtually. They wouldn't be my favorite, but it's great to learn all about them. For people who are looking for activities to do with children, we have lots of resources available on the Living Earth website. We've activities to use and to recycle materials, for example, making a bug hotel, making bird feeders, and make plant and leaf prints. Lots of activities. They're all available on the website, livingearth.ie. So that's just to give you a flavour of what we have available for the week. So we hope we'll see you tomorrow at 5:30 and through the week to come with us on this, I suppose, this travel guide and this journey, learning about biodiversity and what we have on offer right here on our doorstep. So.
Thank you, Sheila. Lots to come then, both here every evening and but also on the website, lots of activities. And once again, we're delighted that we have over 3,000 young people that are going to be doing activities, and that's really important to us. But this slot here is for adults, but young people are welcome, of course. So tell your friends. And you might also want to watch with other people. You can you know, have the family together watching. You're all more than welcome. All the events are going to be posted on our website. So if you have friends who you think could benefit from knowing a little, getting a little bit of encouragement about getting out in nature, please let them know. This video will be up by tomorrow, and you can share it with them. So once again, thank you very much, Dr. Mark Rowe. Thank you very much to Enrique and Ben and the rest of the CalMAS team. Thank you, Sheila. And thank you all for coming and joining with us today. And hopefully we'll see you tomorrow evening. So in the meantime, get out in nature when you can.
Thank you, Owen.
Bye-bye.